I never thought a snow blower would be the thing that would finally break my HOA. But here we are. My name is Ryan Vaughn, and I have lived in the Meadowbrook Estates community in Colorado Springs, Colorado, for exactly 7 years. The neighborhood is one of those cookie-cutter developments where every house looks almost identical, painted in one of 3 approved colors, with perfectly manicured lawns and strict rules about everything from mailbox height to what time you can put your trash cans out. I bought my house here because the price was right, and the location was convenient for my job as an industrial equipment technician. What I did not anticipate was becoming the only certified operator of heavy snow removal equipment in a community that desperately needed one. It started on a Tuesday morning in early November. I was sitting in my kitchen, drinking my second cup of coffee and watching the early morning news when I heard the doorbell ring. Through the frosted glass of my front door, I could see the unmistakable silhouette of Patricia Henderson, the president of our homeowners association. Patricia was exactly what you would picture when someone says the words HOA president. She was 52 years old, had that specific haircut that screamed, "I want to speak to your manager," and wore her authority like a crown. She had been running this HOA with an iron fist for the past 4 years, and everyone in the neighborhood either feared her or actively avoided her. I opened the door with a sinking feeling in my stomach. Patricia never came by just to chat. "Good morning, Ryan," she said, her voice saccharine sweet in that way that immediately put me on edge. "I hope I am not disturbing you." "Morning, Patricia. What can I do for you?" I asked, already knowing this was not going to be pleasant. She held up a manila folder, the kind she always carried when she was about to deliver bad news. "I am afraid we have received multiple complaints from your neighbors about a violation of our community guidelines." I blinked. "Complaints? About what?" "Your snow removal equipment," she said, opening the folder and pulling out several printed photographs. They were pictures of the side of my house, where I had my snow blower and a small plow attachment for my truck parked on a concrete pad. Section 14. Subsection C of our HOA covenants clearly states that all equipment must be stored out of sight from the street and neighboring properties. Your equipment is clearly visible from the Johnson's property next door and from the street if someone walks past at the right angle. I stared at the photos, then back at Patricia. "Are you serious right now? That is snow equipment. We live in Colorado. We get snow. I need that equipment to clear my driveway and the community parking areas." Patricia's smile did not waver. "I understand your frustration, Ryan, but rules are rules. The board has voted unanimously to fine you $250 for this violation. You have 30 days to remedy the situation by either building an enclosed structure to house the equipment or removing it from the property entirely." "This is ridiculous," I said, feeling my blood pressure rising. "I use that equipment to help the entire community. I am the one who clears the main roads when we get those heavy dumps. The HOA hired me to do it." "Yes, and we appreciate your service," Patricia said, her tone suggesting she appreciated nothing of the sort. "However, that does not exempt you from following the same rules as everyone else. The fine stands. You will receive official notice via certified mail within 48 hours. Have a wonderful day." She turned on her heel and walked back down my driveway before I could even formulate a response. I stood there in my doorway, coffee cup in hand, watching her climb into her pristine white SUV and drive away. The cold November air was biting at my face, but I barely noticed. I was too busy processing what had just happened. $250. For parking my snow equipment on my own property. Equipment that I used to help the entire neighborhood. I closed the door and pulled out my phone, scrolling through my contacts until I found Tom Richardson, one of my neighbors who had always been reasonable. Tom answered on the third ring. "Hey Ryan, what is up? Did you know the HOA was planning to fine me for my snow equipment being visible?" I asked. There was a pause. "What? No. When did this happen?" I explained the entire situation, including Patricia's visit and the photographs. Tom listened quietly, then sighed. "Man, that is ridiculous. Everyone knows you are the one who keeps our streets clear when it snows. Patricia has been on some kind of power trip lately. Last month she tried to fine the Martins because their Halloween decorations were still up on November 1st. November 1st, Ryan. She said it violated the holiday decoration timeline in the bylaws. "This is getting out of hand," I said. "You are telling me. Look, there is an HOA meeting next week. You should come and challenge this. Bring documentation of all the work you do for the community. Maybe if enough people speak up, the board will back down." I thanked Tom and hung up, but I was not optimistic. I had been to HOA meetings before, and they were typically just Patricia and her loyal board members rubber stamping whatever she wanted while the rest of us sat there powerless. Still, it was worth a shot. The certified letter arrived 2 days later, exactly as Patricia had promised. It outlined the violation in formal legal language, included the same photographs from her folder, and reiterated the $250 fine. It also included a deadline, December 5th. If I had not remedied the violation by then, the fine would increase to $500, with additional penalties accruing weekly. I showed the letter to my girlfriend, Emma Zimmerman, when she came over that evening. Emma was a paralegal who worked at a firm downtown, and she had a sharp legal mind that I valued. "This is absurd," she said, reading through the letter for the second time. "They are fining you for equipment that you use in service of the community. Apparently that does not matter. Rules are rules, according to Patricia." Emma set the letter down on my kitchen table and looked at me seriously. "Ryan, you need to understand something. HOAs have a lot of legal power. They can put liens on your property if you do not pay these fines. They can even force you to sell your house in extreme cases. I am not saying that will happen here, but you need to take this seriously." "I am taking it seriously," I said. "I am going to the HOA meeting next week to fight it." "Good. But you should also start documenting everything. Every time you use that equipment for community purposes, take photos, log the hours, everything. If this escalates, you want to have a paper trail." I took Emma's advice to heart. Over the next week, I started compiling a detailed record of every time I had used my snow removal equipment for the benefit of Meadowbrook Estates. I went through old photos on my phone, pulled up weather records showing major snowstorms, and even got written statements from several neighbors thanking me for keeping the streets clear. By the time the HOA meeting rolled around, I had a 3-inch binder full of documentation. The meeting was held in the community center, a bland rectangular building at the entrance to our neighborhood. When I arrived at 7 o'clock on Tuesday evening, the parking lot was already half full. Apparently, word had gotten around about my situation, and people were curious to see how it would play out. Inside, the main room was set up with rows of folding chairs facing a long table where Patricia and the other 4 board members sat. Patricia was in the center, flanked by Dennis Crawford and Margaret Walsh on one side, and Robert Kim and Sandra Phillips on the other. They all had name placards in front of them and looked very official. I signed in at the attendance sheet and found a seat near the front. Tom Richardson was already there, and he gave me an encouraging nod. Several other neighbors were scattered throughout the room, including the Johnsons from next door. Mr. Johnson would not meet my eyes, and I realized with a sinking feeling that he was probably the one who had complained about my equipment in the first place. Patricia called the meeting to order at 7:15. She went through the standard preliminary business, including reading the minutes from the last meeting and giving a treasurer's report. Finally, she reached the section for homeowner comments. "We have one resident who has requested to address the board," Patricia said, looking directly at me. "Ryan Vaughn, regarding the equipment storage violation." "Ryan, you have 5 minutes." I stood up, grabbing my binder, and walked to the small podium that had been set up for speakers. My hands were shaking slightly, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Thank you for the opportunity to speak," I began. "As most of you know, I received a notice of violation and a $250 fine for storing my snow removal equipment in a visible location on my property. I am here tonight to respectfully ask the board to reconsider this decision." I opened my binder and pulled out the first set of documents. For the past 7 years, I have been the primary person responsible for clearing snow from our community streets, parking areas, and common spaces. I have done this work as a contractor for the HOA during major storms. I have documentation here of over 40 separate occasions where I have used my personal equipment to serve this community. I held up photos showing me clearing the main road, the visitor parking area, and the sidewalks around the community center. I keep my equipment at my house because it needs to be readily accessible when storms hit. If I had to store it off-site or in an enclosed structure, it would significantly delay my response time during emergencies. Patricia leaned forward, her expression unchanged. "Ryan, no one is questioning the value of your snow removal services. However, the storage of visible equipment is a violation of our community standards, which exist to maintain property values for all residents. You knew these rules when you purchased your home." "I understand that," I said, trying to keep my frustration in check. "But I am asking for a reasonable exception given the circumstances. My equipment directly benefits every single person in this community. Without it, we would need to hire an outside contractor, which would be significantly more expensive for the HOA. Dennis Crawford spoke up. "How much more expensive are we talking about?" I had anticipated this question. Based on quotes I pulled from 3 local snow removal companies, it would cost the HOA approximately $800 to $1,200 per storm to have an outside contractor handle what I currently do. Over the course of a typical winter with 4 to 6 major storms, that is between $5,000 and $7,000. I currently charge the HOA $250 per storm. There was a murmur through the crowd. Several people were nodding, and I could see the board members exchanging glances. Margaret Walsh cleared her throat. "That is a significant difference. Patricia, perhaps we should consider a variance in this case." Patricia's jaw tightened. "A variance sets a precedent. If we allow Ryan to violate the equipment storage rules, what is to stop other homeowners from claiming they need exceptions as well? Before you know it, we will have boats, trailers, and RVs parked in every driveway." "With all due respect," I said, "my situation is unique. I am not asking to park a recreational vehicle. This is equipment that I use specifically for community services that I provide to the HOA. The rules exist for everyone," Patricia said firmly. "The board has made its decision. The fine stands. If you choose not to remedy the violation, additional penalties will be applied as outlined in your notice. Next item of business." I stood there for a moment, stunned. Just like that, the discussion was over. I had presented all my evidence, made a reasonable argument, and been dismissed in less than 10 minutes. I gathered my binder and walked back to my seat, feeling the eyes of my neighbors on me. Tom leaned over and whispered, That was complete garbage. I am sorry, man. The rest of the meeting dragged on with mundane discussions about landscaping contracts and proposals for holiday decorations in the common areas. I barely paid attention. My mind was racing, trying to figure out what to do next. After the meeting ended, several neighbors came up to express their support. Mrs. Martin, an elderly woman who lived 3 houses down from me, squeezed my arm and said, "Do not let Patricia bully you. She has gotten too big for her britches." But support did not change the facts. I had a fine to pay and a deadline to meet. When I got home that night, Emma was waiting for me. She took one look at my face and knew how it had gone. "They did not budge," she asked. "Not even a little. Patricia basically shut me down and moved on." Emma bit her lip, thinking. "Okay, so here is what you do. You comply with the rule, move your equipment. But if they want to play hardball, you can too." "What do you mean? You are a contractor for the HOA, right? You have an agreement with them for snow removal services." I nodded. "It is a pretty informal arrangement. They pay me per storm and I handle the clearing. But you do have something in writing." "Yeah, I have emails from Patricia outlining the arrangement and the payment terms." Emma's eyes lit up. "Good. Here is what you do. Move your equipment off your property. Rent a storage unit if you have to. Then, the next time they need snow removal, you tell them your equipment is not readily available anymore because they forced you to relocate it. You are still willing to do the work, but they will need to pay for the additional time and inconvenience." "You want me to charge them more?" I asked. "I want you to make them understand the consequences of their decision. Right now, Patricia thinks she can have it both ways. She gets to enforce her rules and still have cheap, convenient snow removal services. Show her that actions have consequences." I thought about it for a moment. It was petty, sure, but it was also fair. If the HOA wanted to force me to make my job harder, they could pay for the privilege. Over the next 2 weeks, I made arrangements. I found a storage facility about 3 miles away that had space for my snow blower and plow attachment. It was not ideal, and it cost me $75 a month, but it would solve my immediate problem. On December 3rd, 2 days before the deadline, I moved all my equipment off my property. I took photos of the now empty concrete pad and emailed them to Patricia with a brief message. "Equipment has been relocated per HOA requirements. Please confirm violation has been remedied." She responded within an hour. "Confirmed. Thank you for your compliance. The fine has been waived since you remedied the situation before the deadline." I showed the email to Emma. "Well, that is something. At least I do not have to pay the fine." "Now we wait," Emma said. "Colorado always gets hit with heavy snow in December and January. When the next storm comes, that is when things will get interesting." She was right. We did not have to wait long. On December 18th, the Weather Service issued a winter storm warning for the Colorado Springs area. The forecast called for 12 to 18 inches of snow over a 24-hour period, with high winds creating significant drifting. It was exactly the kind of storm that would normally have me out clearing the Meadowbrook Estates streets multiple times to keep them passable. Sure enough, my phone rang at 6 in the morning on December 19th. It was Patricia. "Ryan, we need you to start clearing the main roads. The snow is already 6 inches deep and it is still coming down hard." I was still in bed, warm under my covers, and I took a moment before responding. "Patricia, I would love to help, but there is a problem. My equipment is no longer stored at my house. Per the HOA requirements, I had to move it to a storage facility." There was a pause. "Well, go get it and get started. We need the roads clear." "I can do that," I said, keeping my voice pleasant. "However, My rental agreement for the storage facility requires 24 hours notice for after-hours access. Since this is an emergency call, I will need to pay an additional fee to the facility for immediate access. I will also need to charge the HOA for my travel time to and from the facility, and the overall job will take significantly longer since I will need to make multiple trips if the storm continues. How much are we talking about? Patricia's voice had an edge to it now. I had done my homework. The emergency access fee for the storage facility is $150. My travel time will add approximately 2 hours to the job at my standard rate of $50 per hour. The job itself will probably require 2 trips because I will need to refuel, and I cannot leave the equipment on site between clearing sessions anymore. All in, I estimate around $800 total. $800. You normally charge $250. Yes, when my equipment was conveniently stored at my house and I could respond immediately, I said. The storage facility relocation was not my choice. It was an HOA requirement. These are the new costs associated with that requirement. I could practically hear Patricia's blood pressure rising through the phone. This is ridiculous. You are price gouging. No, I am charging fair market rate for the new circumstances. If you would like to get quotes from other contractors, feel free. Though I should mention that most snow removal companies are probably already fully booked given the storm. There was a long silence. Finally, Patricia said, "Fine, but we will be discussing this at the next board meeting. Get out here and clear the roads." I got dressed, drove to the storage facility, paid the emergency access fee, and loaded up my equipment. By the time I got back to Meadowbrook Estates and started clearing, it was almost 9 in the morning. Normally, I would have been out at 6 and had the main roads done by 8. The delay meant snow had piled up significantly, and several neighbors were stuck in their driveways. As I worked, I could see people watching from their windows. Some waved. Others just looked annoyed. I did not care. I was doing my job just under new conditions. It took me until 2 in the afternoon to finish the first round of clearing. The snow was still falling, and I knew I would need to come back that evening for a second pass. True to my word, I drove my equipment back to the storage facility, refueled, and then went home for a few hours of rest. At 7 that evening, I repeated the entire process. Another trip to the storage facility, another round of clearing, another trip back. By the time I was done, it was almost midnight and I was exhausted. Under the old arrangement, I would have kept my equipment at my house overnight and just done a quick pass in the evening. Now, everything took 3 times as long. I submitted my invoice to Patricia the next morning, $850, with a detailed breakdown of all charges. She paid it without comment, but I knew this was not over. The emergency board meeting was called for December 27th. I received the notice via email, along with a tersely worded message that my price increase would be a primary topic of discussion. Emma offered to come with me for moral support, but I told her I would handle it. This was between me and the board. When I arrived at the community center, the atmosphere was different from the last meeting. The board members all looked serious, and Patricia had a stack of papers in front of her that I could tell were not good news for me. "Ryan," Patricia began without preamble once the meeting was called to order, "the board has reviewed your recent invoice for snow removal services, and we find the charges to be excessive and unreasonable. Those charges reflect the actual costs and time required under the new circumstances," I said calmly. "When my equipment was stored at my house, I could respond quickly and efficiently. Now that it is stored off-site per HOA requirements, everything takes longer and costs more. You are punishing the community because you did not like our decision about the equipment storage, Patricia said. No, I am charging fair market rate for the services I provide. If you think my prices are unreasonable, you are welcome to hire someone else. Dennis Crawford spoke up. Ryan, we have actually looked into that. We have gotten quotes from 3 commercial snow removal companies. The lowest bid was $900 per storm, and they could not guarantee response times under 6 hours from when we call. I stayed quiet, letting that information sink in. Margaret Walsh looked uncomfortable. It seems we are in a difficult position. Ryan, would you be willing to return to your previous rates if we granted you a variance for equipment storage? Before I could answer, Patricia cut in. Absolutely not. We are not going to be extorted into changing our rules. The board stands by its decision on the equipment storage violation. Ryan can charge whatever he wants, but we will find alternative solutions. What alternative solutions? I asked. You just said the commercial companies are more expensive and slower to respond. We will purchase our own equipment, Patricia said. The HOA will buy a snow blower and plow attachment, and we will hire someone else to operate it. I had not expected that move, and I had to admire the audacity of it. That is your right, I said. However, I should point out that operating a commercial-grade snow blower and plow attachment requires specific certification in Colorado for liability purposes. It is not something just anyone can do. We are aware, Patricia said. We will find a certified operator. Good luck with that, I said, and I meant it. Certified operators were hard to come by, especially during winter when everyone needed them. The meeting ended with the board voting to terminate my snow removal contract, effective immediately. They would purchase their own equipment and find their own operator. I left the community center feeling a mixture of relief and concern. I had not wanted things to escalate this far, but Patricia had backed me into a corner. Emma was less philosophical about it when I told her. She is going to regret this. Wait and see. January proved Emma right. The first major storm after the board meeting hit on January 8th, dropping 14 inches of snow overnight. I woke up that morning, looked out at the white-covered streets of Meadowbrook Estates, and did not do anything. It was not my problem anymore. By noon, the community Facebook page was blowing up with complaints. The streets had not been cleared. People could not get out of their driveways. Several residents were posting that they had called Patricia directly, and she kept telling them the new equipment was on order and an operator had been hired. By the second day, the snow had been packed down by the few cars that could get through, creating rutted, icy roads that were dangerous to drive on. The HOA still had not cleared anything. On the third day, I got a call from Tom Richardson. Ryan, this is getting out of hand. No one can get in or out safely. Patricia is telling everyone the equipment is delayed in shipping, and the operator she hired backed out at the last minute. People are starting to talk about organizing a petition to remove her from the board. That is unfortunate, I said, keeping my tone neutral. But it is not really my problem anymore. They fired me, remember? I know, and everyone knows Patricia screwed up. But is there any way you would be willing to come back and help? Just this once, I thought about it. I was not heartless and I did not want my neighbors to suffer. But I also was not going to let Patricia off the hook that easily. I will make you a deal, I told Tom. I will come clear the roads right now, emergency rates. But I want a written apology from Patricia acknowledging that her enforcement of the equipment storage rule created this situation, and I want a permanent variance allowing me to store my equipment on my property. Tom sighed. I will talk to her, but you know Patricia, she does not apologize. Then I guess the streets stay uncleared. An hour later, my phone rang. It was Patricia, and I could hear the barely controlled fury in her voice. "Ryan, I understand you are willing to provide emergency snow clearing services. Under certain conditions, yes." Tom mentioned a written apology and a variance. "I am not going to apologize for enforcing our community rules, but I am prepared to offer you a conditional variance for equipment storage, contingent on your agreement to provide snow removal services at your original rates." "Not good enough," I said. "I want an unconditional variance, no strings attached, and I will provide services at my current market rates, which are higher than before because my costs have increased." "Your costs have increased because you chose to store your equipment off-site." "No, my costs increased because you forced me to store it off-site. There is a difference." We went back and forth for another 10 minutes. Finally, Patricia made a proposal. "Here is what I can do. I will grant you a variance for equipment storage. You can keep your equipment at your house. In exchange, you will provide snow removal services at your original rates for the remainder of this season. Starting next season, we can renegotiate the contract at market rates, and there will be no written apology." It was not everything I wanted, but it was close. "I want the variance in writing, signed by all board members before I touch a single snowflake. You will have it within 2 hours." True to her word, Patricia emailed me a scanned document signed by all 5 board members granting me an unconditional variance for equipment storage of snow removal equipment on my property. I called the storage facility, loaded up my gear, and spent the next 6 hours clearing the backlog of snow from Meadowbrook Estates. By the time I finished, it was dark and I was exhausted, but the streets were clear and passable. Several neighbors came out to thank me personally. Mrs. Martin even brought me a thermos of hot chocolate. I thought that would be the end of it. I had my variance, Patricia had her snow removal service back at the old rates, and everyone could move on. But I had underestimated just how vindictive Patricia could be. 2 weeks later, on January 23rd, I came home from work to find a notice taped to my front door. It was from the HOA, informing me that I was being fined $300 for unauthorized commercial vehicle parking because my truck with the plow attachment was visible from the street. I read the notice 3 times, feeling my blood pressure spike. The variance I had been granted specifically covered snow removal equipment. My truck with the plow attachment was snow removal equipment. This was harassment, plain and simple. I called Patricia immediately. She answered on the first ring as if she had been expecting my call. "Yes, Ryan. I just got a notice about a fine for my truck. The variance covers snow removal equipment." "The variance covers snow removal equipment stored on a concrete pad on the side of your house," Patricia said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Your truck is parked in your driveway, which is clearly visible from the street. That is a separate violation under Section 21, subsection F of our covenants, which prohibits commercial vehicle parking in residential driveways. My truck is not a commercial vehicle. It is my personal truck with a plow attachment. The plow attachment makes it a commercial vehicle according to our definitions. The fine stands. Have a wonderful evening." She hung up before I could respond. I stood there in my driveway, staring at my phone, realizing that Patricia was never going to let this go. She had lost face in front of the community, and now she was determined to make my life miserable in revenge. Emma was livid when I told her, "This is harassment. She is specifically targeting you because you made her look bad." "I know, but what can I do?" "She is technically right about the covenant language. I checked." Emma was quiet for a moment, then pulled out her laptop. "Let me do some research. There has to be something we can do." While Emma researched, I sat down and really looked at the HOA covenants for the first time in years. They were a thick document, full of dense legal language and incredibly specific rules about everything imaginable. As I read through them, I started to notice something interesting. Patricia was violating several rules herself. Section 32, subsection B stated that all board members must hold annual elections and could not serve more than 3 consecutive terms without a community-wide vote to extend. Patricia had been president for 4 years without any special election. Section 18 prohibited the use of HOA funds for personal purposes without unanimous board approval. I remembered Patricia mentioning at a meeting last year that she had used HOA money to pay for her lawyer fees in a dispute with a contractor. I had not thought much of it at the time, but now I wondered if she had actually gotten board approval. I pointed these things out to Emma. She looked up from her laptop, her eyes sharp. "Ryan, I think we need to do a deep dive into the HOA's financial records and governance documents. If Patricia has been playing fast and loose with the rules for herself while hammering everyone else, that is a serious problem. How do we get access to those records? HOA members have a legal right to inspect financial records and governing documents. You just need to make a formal written request. They have to provide them within a reasonable time frame." The next day, I submitted a formal written request to the HOA board for copies of all financial records for the past 4 years, board meeting minutes, and any documentation related to board member elections. I cited the specific Colorado statute that gave me the right to these documents. Patricia did not respond directly to my request, but I got a call from Sandra Phillips, one of the other board members, 2 days later. "Ryan, Patricia is very upset about your records request. She thinks you are trying to cause trouble." "I am exercising my rights as an HOA member," I said. "I have concerns about governance and financial management, and I am entitled to review the relevant documents." Sandra hesitated. "Look, between you and me, Patricia has been making a lot of decisions without full board approval lately. I have tried to push back, but she can be very intimidating. If you are looking for irregularities, you will probably find them." That was all the confirmation I needed. "Will you help me?" "I will do what I can. The records request is legitimate, so we have to honor it. I will make sure you get everything you need." True to her word, Sandra delivered a full set of documents to my house 1 week later. It was 4 boxes worth of paper, financial statements, meeting minutes, and correspondence. Emma and I spent an entire weekend going through everything, making notes and highlighting relevant sections. What we found was damning. Patricia had been essentially running the HOA as her personal fiefdom for years. She had approved expenses without board votes, including paying her own legal fees from HOA funds. She had extended her term as president without the required election. She had even paid herself a monthly administrative stipend of $500 for the past 2 years without board authorization. Most seriously, she had misappropriated almost $15,000 in HOA funds over the past 4 years for personal expenses that she had disguised as community costs. There were receipts for landscaping at her personal residence that had been billed as common area maintenance, invoices for furniture that was supposedly for the community center, but had never appeared there, and several large cash withdrawals with no documentation at all. "This is embezzlement," Emma said, looking at the stack of highlighted documents. "Ryan, this is not just an HOA dispute anymore. This is a crime." I felt a knot forming in my stomach. I had not wanted things to go this far. I had just wanted to park my snow blower at my house and do my job. But now, I was sitting on evidence of significant financial fraud. "What do we do?" I asked. "You need to present this to the full HOA membership and the police. Patricia needs to be removed from the board, and she needs to face consequences for what she has done." I knew Emma was right, but I also knew that reporting Patricia to the police would blow up the entire community. People would take sides. It would get ugly. But the alternative was letting her continue to abuse her power and steal from everyone. I made my decision. I contacted Tom Richardson and several other neighbors I trusted, and we organized an emergency meeting of the HOA membership. We sent notices to every homeowner in Meadowbrook Estates, citing our right under the bylaws to call a special meeting with a petition of 25% of homeowners. We got 40% of homeowners to sign on. The meeting was scheduled for February 15th in the community center. I spent the 2 weeks before that meeting preparing my presentation. I created detailed spreadsheets showing the unauthorized expenses, timelines of Patricia's term extensions without proper elections, and summaries of the bylaw violations. Emma helped me organize everything into a clear, professional presentation. I also contacted the Colorado Springs Police Department and spoke with a detective in their financial crimes unit. I explained the situation and provided copies of all the evidence I had gathered. The detective, a middle-aged man named Robert Finch, took my report seriously. "This looks like a pretty clear case of embezzlement and fraud," Detective Finch said, reviewing the documents. "I am going to need to interview the other board members and examine the original financial records. But based on what you have shown me, I think there is probable cause to open an investigation." "What happens next?" I asked. "We will conduct our investigation quietly for now. Do not tip off Patricia Henderson that we are looking into this. Present your findings at your HOA meeting, and we will move forward from there based on what we uncover." The night of February 15th arrived. The community center was packed. Almost every homeowner in Meadowbrook Estates had shown up, which was unprecedented. People knew something big was happening. Patricia and the other board members were seated at their usual table, looking nervous. Patricia kept her composure, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. She knew this was not going to be a friendly meeting. Tom Richardson called the meeting to order, since he was the one who had officially submitted the petition for the special meeting. He gave a brief overview of why we were there, then turned the floor over to me. I stood up, feeling dozens of eyes on me, and walked to the podium. I had a laptop connected to a projector, and my presentation was ready to go. "Thank you all for coming," I began. "I know many of you are wondering why this meeting was called. Over the past several months, I have had increasing concerns about the management and governance of our HOA. Tonight, I am going to present evidence of significant financial mismanagement and bylaw violations by our current board president, Patricia Henderson." There was an immediate murmur through the crowd. Patricia stood up. "This is outrageous. Ryan is trying to smear me because I enforce the community rules against him. This is a personal vendetta, nothing more." "Please sit down, Patricia," Tom said firmly. "Ryan has the floor." Patricia remained standing for a moment, her face flushed with anger, but then she slowly sat back down. I clicked to the first slide of my presentation. It showed a timeline of Patricia's terms as president. According to our HOA bylaws, board members can serve no more than 3 consecutive terms without a special election. Patricia has been president for 4 years without any such election. This is a violation of our governing documents. I clicked to the next slide, which showed several expense reports. In addition, Patricia has approved numerous expenses without required board votes. These include legal fees for personal disputes, furniture purchases, and landscaping services. Upon investigation, Many of these expenses were for her personal benefit, not for the community. I went through slide after slide, building my case methodically. I showed the unauthorized administrative stipend Patricia had been paying herself. I showed the cash withdrawals with no documentation. I showed the landscaping bills for her personal property that had been charged to the HOA. By the time I reached the final slide, which summarized the total misappropriated funds at just over $15,000, the room was silent. People were staring at Patricia, who had gone pale. "These are lies," Patricia said, her voice shaking. "Ryan has fabricated these documents to get revenge. This is not real." "Actually, all of these documents came from the HOA's own records," I said calmly. "I submitted a formal records request under Colorado law, and everything I have presented tonight is from official HOA files. Any homeowner here tonight can request the same records and verify what I have shown you." Dennis Crawford, one of the other board members, stood up. He looked shaken. "Patricia, is this true? Did you really pay yourself a stipend without board approval?" Patricia's mask finally cracked. "I have devoted countless hours to managing this community. I deserve to be compensated for my time. The rest of you have no idea how much work it takes to run this HOA." "That does not give you the right to pay yourself without authorization," Margaret Walsh said, also standing. "Patricia, if what Ryan is showing us is accurate, you have committed fraud." "I have not committed anything," Patricia snapped. "This is all a misunderstanding. The expenses were legitimate. The stipend was reasonable. You are all overreacting." Tom Richardson took control. "I move that we vote immediately to remove Patricia Henderson from her position as HOA president and from the board entirely, pending a full audit of our financial records." "I second that motion," Dennis Crawford said. The vote was overwhelming. Out of the 72 homeowners present, 68 voted to remove Patricia from the board. Only Patricia herself and 3 others voted against the motion. Patricia stood up, her face contorted with rage. "You are all going to regret this. I will sue every single one of you for defamation. You have no idea what you have done." She grabbed her purse and stormed out of the community center. The room erupted in conversation as soon as the door slammed behind her. Tom called for order. "We need to elect an interim board president and arrange for a full independent audit of our finances. I nominate Sandra Phillips for interim president." Sandra was elected unanimously. She immediately moved to hire a forensic accounting firm to conduct a thorough review of the HOA's books. After the meeting, several neighbors came up to thank me. Mrs. Martin gave me a hug. "You did the right thing, Ryan. Patricia needed to be stopped." But I did not feel triumphant. I felt exhausted and more than a little sick. This was my community and now it was torn apart. Emma squeezed my hand. "You did what you had to do." Patricia made her choices. Over the next 2 weeks, the forensic accounting firm completed their audit. Their findings confirmed everything I had presented and uncovered an additional $8,000 in questionable expenses. The total amount Patricia had misappropriated came to just over $23,000. The new board voted to refer the matter to the Colorado Springs Police Department. Detective Finch and his team executed a search warrant on Patricia's home and seized her personal financial records and computer. On March 8th, Patricia Henderson was arrested and charged with theft, embezzlement, and fraud. The charges carried potential prison time of up to 6 years. The arrest made the local news. There was a brief segment on the evening broadcast showing Patricia being led out of her house in handcuffs, her face hidden behind her hands. The reporter described it as a stunning fall from grace for a local HOA president who had been accused of embezzling tens of thousands of dollars from her own community. I watched the news report with mixed feelings. I had not wanted to destroy Patricia's life. I had just wanted to park my snow blower at my house. Emma sensed what I was thinking. Do not feel guilty. Patricia did this to herself. She abused her power, she stole from her neighbors, and when you called her out on it, she tried to retaliate against you even more. This is not on you. I know, but it still feels terrible. The legal proceedings dragged on for months. Patricia hired a lawyer and initially pleaded not guilty, claiming the charges were the result of a personal vendetta and misunderstanding. But the evidence was overwhelming, and in July, she accepted a plea deal. Patricia pleaded guilty to 2 counts of theft and 1 count of embezzlement. She was sentenced to 18 months in prison, with the possibility of early release for good behavior. She was also ordered to pay full restitution of $23,000 to the HOA, plus court costs and fees. The sentence was lighter than it could have been, but the judge took into account her lack of prior criminal record and her agreement to repay the money. Still, Patricia Henderson would spend over a year in prison, and her reputation was destroyed. Meanwhile, life in Meadowbrook Estates slowly returned to normal. The new board, led by Sandra Phillips, was infinitely more reasonable than Patricia had been. They focused on actual community needs rather than petty enforcement of minor violations. My variance for equipment storage remained in place, and when it came time to renegotiate my snow removal contract for the following season, the board agreed to fair market rates that reflected the actual value of my services. I continued to provide snow removal services for the community throughout the following winter. This time, there were no complaints about where I parked my equipment, and when major storms hit, I was able to respond quickly and efficiently. In April, a year after the whole ordeal began, I received a letter from the HOA. Inside was a check for $1,000 and a note signed by Sandra and the rest of the board. Ryan, this is a bonus payment in recognition of your exceptional service to the community over the past year, and an apology for the treatment you received under previous management. Thank you for your dedication and for having the courage to speak up when it mattered. I showed the letter to Emma. She smiled. See, good things happen when you stand up for yourself. It was not just me, I said. You helped every step of the way. I could not have done this without you. True, she said with a grin. I expect payment in the form of dinner at that Italian place I like. Deal. We went to dinner that night, and as we sat there eating pasta and drinking wine, I reflected on everything that had happened over the past year. It had started with something so simple, a complaint about a snow blower being visible from the street. But it had uncovered corruption, led to an arrest, and ultimately changed the entire dynamic of my community for the better. I learned that HOAs could be a force for good when run by reasonable people, but they could also become instruments of petty tyranny when the wrong person got power. I learned that standing up to bullies was not easy, but it was necessary. And I learned that sometimes doing the right thing required being willing to see it through, even when it got ugly. Patricia Henderson was released from prison in early November after serving 14 months of her sentence. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she had moved out of state, probably to escape the shame and rebuild her life somewhere no one knew her story. I did not wish her ill, but I also did not feel particularly sorry for her. She had made her choices, and she had paid the price for them. As for me, I was still living in Meadowbrook Estates, still clearing snow when storms hit, and still parking my equipment on that concrete pad beside my house. Every time I looked at it, I remembered the absurd fight that had started all of this, and I shook my head at the irony. A fight over visible snow equipment had brought down an entire HOA president and exposed years of corruption. It seemed almost too ridiculous to be real, but it had happened. And in the end, my community was better for it. The following December, exactly 2 years after Patricia had first appeared at my door with that manila folder full of photos, we got our first major storm of the season. I was out at 5 in the morning, my snow blower roaring to life in the cold darkness, clearing the streets so my neighbors could get to work and school safely. As I worked, Tom Richardson pulled up beside me in his car, rolled down his window, and gave me a thumbs up. "Mrs. Martin waved from her front window. Several other neighbors came out to thank me as I passed their houses. This was what community was supposed to be. People helping each other, following reasonable rules, and treating one another with respect and common sense. Patricia had forgotten that in her quest for control and personal gain, and it had cost her everything. I finished clearing the main roads just as the sun was coming up, painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of gold and pink. I parked my snow blower back on its concrete pad, clearly visible from multiple angles, and smiled. Let someone try to complain about it now. I would be ready, but no complaint came. Because the new board understood what Patricia never had, that communities thrive when people work together, not when they work against each other. Rules existed to serve the community, not the other way around. I went inside, made myself a hot cup of coffee, and sat down at my kitchen table. Emma came downstairs, still in her pajamas, and joined me. "Roads all clear?" she asked. "Roads all clear," I confirmed. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "you should write down this whole story someday. No one would believe it if they did not hear it from you directly." "Maybe I will," I said. "But right now I am just happy it is over." "Is it though?" Emma asked with a mischievous smile. "You are on the board now. You got elected last month, remember?" She was right. In the most recent HOA election, I had been voted onto the board as treasurer. I had not particularly wanted the position, but several neighbors had convinced me that the community needed people who understood the importance of transparency and accountability. "That is different," I said. "I am not going to turn into Patricia." "I know you are not," Emma said, squeezing my hand. "That is exactly why you are the right person for the job." As I sat there with Emma, warm coffee in my hands and the knowledge that my community was in good hands, I realized she was right. The fight over the snow equipment had been frustrating and exhausting, but it had also taught me something important about civic responsibility. Sometimes you do not get to choose the battles you fight. Sometimes they choose you. And when that happens, all you can do is stand your ground, gather your evidence, and see it through to the end. I had done that, and my community was better for it. Patricia was gone. The corruption was rooted out. The rules were being applied fairly and reasonably. And I could park my snow blower wherever the hell I wanted. Life was good.